If you wonder how to use water-soluble oil pastels like the Neocolor II, this video will give you some insight on how to paint realism with them, with plenty of tips along the way. Hello and welcome, I'm Françoise. I'd only tried water-soluble oil pastels once before with another brand, and I would admit I felt pretty nervous to tackle this painting because the reference is challenging and because I felt I didn't know water-soluble oil pastels that well yet. But you guys asked for videos about them after I shared my watercolor pencil tips, so I had to take on this challenge, and this could be the very first of many videos about water-soluble oil pastels. Water-soluble oil pastels are a type of art medium that combines the properties of oil pastels and watercolors. You can create a bunch of different effects with them. The problem is that a lot of people don't know how to use them. The first thing I did was to pick a reference photo that I love, because that's key to finding the drive to nail a piece of art despite the fear. I love the gorgeous colors and background and the overall simplicity of the portrait and clothing. It took me a couple of hours to freehand draw it so it looks accurate. I think it matches the original pretty well, and I was really happy with the process. It was so soothing. If you're in a place right now where you don't know how to draw, don't worry, because you can always use the grid method or trace a drawing. And really whatever motivates you to create is valid. And believe it or not, I've had my Neocolor II for a couple of years, even maybe a little more than that. And I haven't been using them simply because, like many, I didn't know how. You can see I have a basic set as well as autumn colors that I picked at a store later for a project I never got around to try. So it's actually you guys who are challenging me to try new stuff. First, we want to pick the right colors in the form of a limited palette, ideally 3 to 5 colors, so we don't overwhelm ourselves with too many colors to think about while painting. That's why it makes sense to swatch each color first and then pick. It's easier to do it when you know exactly what's at your disposal. I must have tried these just to see because the tips are dirty, but that was before I was into watercolors and I was experimenting with coloring books. A tip for you that I also use with regular oil pastels or white pencils is to clean up the pastel with a paper towel if it's dirty, otherwise you will get that other color on paper when you start using it. Right away, I found coloring with the sticks felt creamy, which would make sense since these are labeled as wax oil pastels by Caran d'Ache. And the colors look really rich, as you can see, which would also make sense as Caran d'Ache is a qualitative brand, although they fit this product into their hobby section. I noticed I was getting those visible lines while blending, and it reminded me about this video I made recently with distressed watercolor pencils that I thought looked more like water-soluble wax oil pastels. Just to say I was starting to feel a little bit more confident and like this was not unknown territory after all. But I didn't want to jeopardize my drawing, so I decided to use these water-soluble oil pastels as I would watercolor and add a few special techniques once I'd have something nice going. I was trying to decide if I should pick black or brown for shadows. When you're unsure, you can color mix on a separate sheet just to see. In the end, I went with black. I think it's better to render the ominous vibes of the photo, and it's really pigmented too. So in total, I had 6 colors, or just 4 if you consider black and white as the shadow and highlight colors. Colors close to the 3 primaries for the skin tones, and a blue-green color that matches what I needed for the clothing and background. You're going to see a few water-soluble oil pastels techniques in this video, and if you'd like that in the future, I can plan on a video where I show all the techniques I can come up with. I used a scrap piece of paper to create swatches of paint I'll use to achieve a smooth background. And look at how beautifully the color is spreading. And the colors look really rich. I remember when I used these distressed watercolor pencils that were made just like water-soluble oil pastels, it wasn't like that at all, and I had a real hard time painting. I'll add this video to watch next if you want to check it out. I started noticing how the colors actually looked more bluish than what I thought it would, so all I did to make it look more green was to add yellow, and you can see here how having the primaries in your palette can come in handy. With habit and practice mixing colors, you'll be able to take on new mediums and actually fix all the small color mixing problems that come up. Another plus from practicing with other water-related mediums like watercolor and watercolor pencils is I also know how to manage the water next to the paints, and this was helpful with this challenging painting because I could fully focus on the water-soluble oil pastels and nailing the art. When you're getting started, I would always recommend to pick simple subjects. Recently, I made a how-to video where I show all you can do from one simple shape. So if you want to try Neocolor II like I did but with something easy, start with an apple for instance. A tip for striking paintings is to avoid having just one color per section, unless you paint in monochrome. The painting can still look like it's just one color, like our background here, but it will always look so much better with a few more added colors that look subtle, but are there still. Besides, when you observe a reference well, if you look hard, you can see those other colors in there. It's one of the components of realism in colorful artworks. The skin tone was very easy to achieve with the yellow and pinkish tones I picked. Usually I'll add blue, but since this type of yellow and pink were not truly primary colors, just very close to them, it worked. And since the paper was still wet, I started placing shadows on the face. With realism, it's worth it to be patient and know you have to build up the layers little by little. At first, it will look bland, boring, like something is missing, but that's normal. You just need to keep going and refining the colors, contrast, and lastly, the details. At this point, it was going really well, but I was still a bit nervous about the looks of the portraits at the end. I'm never afraid to layer, and I think that's why my art looks so realistic, because with layering, you can improve painting, fix little things, add contrast, vibrancy. So here is to another background layer. I needed to add shadows all around the character, so I incorporated black to the rest of the colors. But first, I refined the main colors by adding more of the blue-green color I had created where I thought the background needed more. Same for the skin color. I kept building up the realism, even if right now it doesn't look realistic yet. The paper was already drying, so when that happens and I'm not done, I'll just dry the whole sheet, wet it again, and keep working. I really wanted my background to look awesome, so next I worked on the shadows. I noticed that with water-soluble oil pastels, the sheet dries faster than what I'm used to with watercolor. I think the waxy aspect of these Neocolor II doesn't help, but other than that, really I was having a lot of fun, and it's always an option to dry the sheet and relayer again. There's opportunity everywhere, and when the sheet is drying fast, why not go lift color off the sheet where highlights are needed? In this particular piece, I knew these subtle highlights would help the main subject stand out all the more. Funny thing is I was a bit afraid of adding the rock fragments for some reason, probably because there are so many and they contribute to the atmosphere of the piece. But since the sheet was drying, this was another perfect opportunity to do it then. So the edges look sharp but still soft, like on the reference photo. Like I said, I wanted to nail this painting, so I went with another layer to make the edges even darker. Usually 2 or 3 layers will do for a background in my painting style. But here, it's very, very dark all around. So that's why it was important to make it accurate in the painting too. I added a lot of black, but at the same time, I found I needed a lot of the other colors too because the Neocolor II black is very overpowering. By picking up pigment directly from the stick with my paintbrush, I was also able to increase shadows in the corners of my sheet. My previous rock fragments were fading because of the added layer, but it was a good thing because they would now look like far away fragments, so it's just perfect for realism and building up depth. And that's why I added more of them. It was very easy to do now I knew my technique for them was working well. I love that it's easy to lift color on layers of Neocolor II. I wasn't expecting it, and it doesn't bother me, on the contrary. It allowed me to create the subtle highlights I needed for these fragments. And later you'll see another cool technique to finish the realism in this background, but for now, I think it looks gorgeous. I really wanted to work more on the main character. I took advantage of the break to wash my paintbrushes, change the water, paper towels, starting fresh. The painting itself took me 4 or 5 hours spread out throughout the day because it's school break time here and all 4 of my kids are home. Working on the face and clothes is by far my favorite part, to shape each feature with paint and water. The goal here was to make sure there was enough color so the subject looked alive, But at the same time, in a piece like this, there was a need for a lot of shadows. That's where the colors I picked in the beginning, yellow and pink, came in handy for the face, and the greenish blue tone I've been working with on the clothes was also helpful. I got into the habit with watercolor of working on a painting as a whole. It helps me check I have the contrast right. So I work on sections, but I still keep coming back to each one. And with that method, I noticed that I needed even more dark tones in my background, so I added another layer. Whatever it takes to finish a painting and feel proud of my work is fine by me, and I don't rush the process. I took each part slowly and I built it up. Towards the end of that process, I started adding black over the top of the previous layers, and I appreciate it's so easy to lift the water-soluble oil pastels to create the most subtle highlights. I was a bit nervous throughout the portrait I'd mess up the face and ruin it all, since I took my time to draw the sketch. But it turned out just like I was hoping, and I knew already this would become one of my most favorite paintings I've done so far. I wanted to shape some of the rock fragments better now, the ones that are the sharpest in the foreground, and finish this painting with last touches after that. If you've made it till here, tell me in the comments if you've recognized the character that I'm painting, and next we'll move on to the highlights. With realism, you want to always have midtones, which would be the colors I picked for the project, but also shadows, black mixed with those midtones here, and also highlights, and that's why I had picked the white water-soluble oil pastel. I picked the paint up directly from the white stick, and it worked well for subtle highlights, but I could see I wouldn't be able to add crisp ones with it, at least not with this technique. In the background, I needed to add a few touches of that white stick to bring some of these flying fragments forward a bit, but without drawing too much attention to them either, since I wanted the main subject to stand out since the start. For the smallest highlights, like the fingernails for instance, and the crisp highlights, I like a white gel pen since I always paint for fun and my own pleasure. Otherwise, extra thin white watercolor or gouache would work here too. This was an awesome experience using the Neocolor II. I hope I was able to convey you can paint anything with them. For more art from me, I suggest this video I mentioned earlier as well as my playlist that you will find in the description of the video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.